Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an absolute juggernaut of the business world, Stephen R. Covey's 1989 pop management phenomenon, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, if you've spent literally any time in a corporate setting, you have for sure heard these buzzwords thrown around. But we aren't just doing a standard book review today. We're actually going to map out exactly how this entire framework operates, breaking it down into its absolute core actionable parts.
But hold on, here is the ultimate hook for today's explainer, and it comes straight out of David Spahn's 2018 academic review. The big question is, was Covey actually right? Like, is this famous framework just peak 1989 self-help motivation, or is it genuinely scientifically sound, academically validated leadership theory? Well, we're going to look directly at the data to find out.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We'll start with the anatomy of effectiveness, then map out our evolutionary journey from the private victory of dependence to independence, and then into the public victory of interdependence. Finally, we'll wrap up with renewal and deliver that academic verdict.
Starting with Part 1, the anatomy of effectiveness, the whole inside-out approach. So, to really get Covey's framework, you've kind of got to wrap your head around his foundational argument about human behavior. The entire 7-habit system relies heavily on the idea that true, lasting change requires an inside-out approach. And to pull that off, we need to define what a paradigm is. Basically, a paradigm is just your mental map. It's how you interpret reality. To actually change your behavior, you can't just learn a neat new conversational trick. You have to first change your paradigms, fundamentally shifting your core sense of who you are and what you deeply value.
And this brilliantly illustrates the journey. Covey calls it the maturity continuum, and it's basically a sequential, integrated, step-by-step approach to personal development. We all start right at the bottom in dependence, relying totally on others. Through the first 3 habits, we achieve what he calls a private victory, moving up to independence, where we take care of ourselves. But actually, independence isn't the ultimate goal. The highest level is interdependence. That's the public victory of combining our strengths with others to massively multiply our effectiveness. Which brings us to Part 2, achieving the private victory, mastering the self.
This private victory phase is where we develop the fundamental fiber of our own character traits. It's built on 3 compounding habits that you have to master before you even attempt to lead or influence anyone else. Covey uses a fantastic agricultural metaphor here. You simply cannot harvest a crop before you plant it. The same goes for leadership. You can't be effective out in public until you've locked down these 3 private habits of self-leadership.
Right, so it all kicks off with Habit 1, be proactive. Heavily inspired by Viktor Frankl's unimaginable experiences in a concentration camp, Covey points out that between any stimulus and our response, human beings have the ultimate freedom to choose. Being proactive doesn't just mean taking initiative, it really means taking responsibility. It's about focusing your energy strictly on your circle of influence, those things you actually have control over, rather than just passively reacting to external conditions that you literally can't change.
Once you've taken that responsibility, you move right into Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. This is built on the principle that all things are created twice. First, there's the first creation, your mental blueprint. Then, there's the second creation, the actual physical reality. Effective leaders mentally create their path first, often by writing a changeless personal mission statement. That statement acts as an anchor, keeping them incredibly grounded through all sorts of unpredictable changes.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Habit 3, put first things first, actually operationalizes that mental blueprint. It's completely about self-management. In the wild world of time management, the real magic happens in Quadrant 2, things that are important but not urgent. We're talking about planning, learning, and relationship building. Covey proves that prioritizing these Quadrant 2 activities while having the absolute courage to say no to the distracting urgency of Quadrant 3, like drowning in irrelevant meetings, is the true essence of effective self-management.
All right, Part 3, achieving the public victory, shifting into interdependence.
Now that you've achieved independence, you step into the much more complex, interdependent reality of working with and leading others. This kicks off with Habit 4, think win-win. See, we are deeply scripted by our culture to think in terms of win-lose, which totally stems from a scarcity mindset. But a win-win paradigm relies on an abundance mentality. It's the profound understanding that there is enough success to go around for everyone, and it requires a really delicate balance of having the courage to speak your mind while maintaining deep consideration for the other person.
So, the crucial point is how we actually communicate within that win-win mindset, which brings us to Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. The problem is, most of us listen autobiographically. We just filter what someone says through our own experiences to prep our own reply. Covey tells us we have to completely suspend our own frame of reference. When we truly listen to understand, we give people what he calls psychological air, and that builds deep, foundational trust.
When you actually pull off that win-win mentality and pair it with empathic listening, boom, you unlock habit 6, synergize. Synergy is the ultimate test of all the previous habits combined. It's the realization that the whole is genuinely mathematically greater than the sum of its parts. In high-trust environments, people don't just settle for compromise. They utilize their diverse, totally unique perspectives to unlock creative cooperation, discovering solutions that are far better than anyone could have dreamed up alone.
Let's move to and see how this builds into part 4, renewal and the verdict.
We've got one habit left, and honestly, it's the engine that keeps this whole continuum running. Habit 7 is sharpen the saw. Think of it like a lumberjack who is literally too busy sawing to stop and sharpen his blade. You have to take time for continuous, balanced self-renewal across 4 key dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social/emotional. Balancing these 4 areas is the ultimate quadrant 2 activity, requiring a daily private victory that gives you the energy to go out and achieve those massive public victories.
Okay, now for the verdict. Back in 2018, academic David Spohn ran a fascinating audit. He cross-referenced Covey's 7 habits with the 5 major academic leadership theories: ethical, authentic, transformational, servant, and leader-member exchange. The whole goal was to see if the science actually backs up the self-help.
Neutrally analyzing that data reveals something incredibly intriguing. There is actually broad academic consensus for the interpersonal habits. Habit 4 and Habit 5 are universally supported by all 5 of the major theories. However, Habit 3, which covers time management, and Habit 7, focusing on balance, completely lack core theoretical support. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong, but surprisingly, they just aren't considered central components of modern academic leadership models.
But, and this is a massive but, Spohn's academic review leaves us with an incredibly important and totally impartial warning. Subscribing to these habits without a solid ethical foundation can lead to absolute disaster. If you look at it, history is literally littered with highly effective leaders. They were proactive, they had incredible vision, they communicated perfectly, but they were terribly misguided, causing catastrophic damage on organizational, cultural, and even global scales. Being effective is a ridiculously powerful tool, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool. The science clearly backs much of Covey's work, proving it can create genuinely effective individuals. But that leaves us with one final provocative question for you to reflect on. As you go out and apply this scientifically validated framework in your own life to increase your influence, how will you ensure you balance your newfound effectiveness with unwavering ethics? Thanks for learning with us today on The Explainer.